Europe is the most peaceful continent.
That sentence sounds comforting, reassuring, almost like a promise. It's repeated in classrooms, policy papers, and international rankings. It appears in reports measuring quality of life, human development, safety, and stability. And on the surface, the evidence seems convincing. Borders are quiet, cities are intact, children go to school without hearing sirens, governments change without gunfire. Compared to many regions of the world, Europe does look peaceful. But history has a way of whispering when we try to declare conclusions too early. Because Europe has said this before, many times, and every time it did, something followed. The continent that invented modern war. Before Europe ever claimed peace, it perfected war. Between 1914 and 1945, Europe did not just fight conflicts, it redefined violence. Industrial-scale killing, chemical weapons, strategic bombing of civilians, genocide organized by bureaucracy, nuclear weapons conceived in European laboratories. By the end of World War II, over 60 million people were dead, most of them European. Cities like Warsaw, Dresden, Stalingrad, and Berlin were reduced to ash. An entire generation disappeared into trenches, camps, and mass graves. When the war ended, Europe did not celebrate victory. It collapsed in silence.
And from that silence came a vow, spoken quietly but deeply: never again.
Peace was not chosen, it was forced.
Europe's peace did not begin with forgiveness. It began with fear.
Fear of repeating the unthinkable. Fear of total annihilation. Fear of nuclear fire. Two superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union, carved the continent into zones of influence. Europe became the front line of the Cold War, filled with missiles aimed at itself.
Peace was maintained not because nations trusted each other, but because destroying the enemy meant destroying yourself. This was not harmony. It was a balance of terror.
The European Union, a peace project or a power system?
The European Union is often described as the greatest peace experiment in human history. Former enemies, France and Germany, bound their economies together. Coal and steel, once tools of war, became instruments of integration.
And it worked. No major war between EU member states, no armies marching across borders, no national collapse through violence. But here is the question few like to ask. Was peace the goal or the outcome of control? The EU did not erase power, it reorganized it. Economic dependency replaced military domination. Regulations replaced tanks. Debt replaced occupation. Countries that resisted the system, economically or politically, paid a price. Ask Greece, ask Yugoslavia, ask Ukraine. Peace, it turns out, has conditions.
Peace inside, violence outside.
While Europe enjoyed internal stability, something else was happening beyond its borders. Weapons manufactured in Europe flooded the Middle East and Africa. Former colonies remained economically dependent on their colonizers. Proxy wars were fought with European intelligence, funding, and equipment. Europe did not stop war. It relocated it. From the inside, Europe looked peaceful. From the outside, it looked powerful. And power always leaves fingerprints. The illusion of distance. For decades, Europeans believed war was something that happened elsewhere. Then came 1992. Yugoslavia collapsed, not in theory, but in blood.
Sarajevo was besieged for nearly 4 years. Ethnic cleansing returned to European soil. Concentration camps reappeared, not as history, but as reality. Europe watched. Slowly, cautiously, politically. Peace did not prevent war. It delayed responsibility. Ukraine, the return of the unthinkable. When Russian tanks crossed into Ukraine, the illusion shattered. This was not a distant conflict. This was Europe. Missiles struck cities. Mass graves were discovered. Millions fled across borders. Suddenly, the phrase, "the most peaceful continent," sounded fragile. Was Europe peaceful because it had solved war, or because war had not yet returned? What does peace actually mean? Is peace the absence of fighting, or the presence of justice? Is peace measured by quiet streets, or by where suffering is outsourced? Is peace real, or simply postponed? Europe may be peaceful now, but history warns us about confusing stability with permanence, because Europe has been calm before, and every time it believed the calm would last. This is only the surface, because beneath treaties, institutions, and ideals, there are stories rarely told. Stories of control disguised as cooperation, of morality shaped by convenience, of peace maintained by unseen costs, and the most uncomfortable question of all: can a continent built on centuries of conquest ever truly be peaceful, or only temporarily restrained? Europe often presents its peace as a moral achievement, as if history reached its conclusion somewhere between open borders and shared currency. But peace is never just a feeling. It is a system, and every system has beneficiaries and costs. Colonial peace, built elsewhere, paid elsewhere. To understand modern European peace, you have to look far beyond Europe. For centuries, European empires extracted wealth, labor, and resources from Asia, Africa, and the Americas. Gold from Africa, spices from South Asia, rubber from the Congo, oil from the Middle East. The violence did not disappear. It simply happened away from European streets. By the time Europe began speaking the language of human rights and peace, much of its wealth had already been accumulated through conquest. This raises an uncomfortable question. Is Europe peaceful because it learned from history, or because history paid its debts early? The quiet power of institutions. Europe's stability is often credited to strong institutions, courts, laws, treaties, councils, parliaments. And it's true, institutions matter. But institutions are not neutral. They shape outcomes. They decide winners and losers. They enforce rules written by those already in power. When countries align with European systems, they are rewarded with access. When they resist, pressure follows. Economic, diplomatic, sometimes military. Peace here is not chaos-free freedom. It is managed order. And managed order can look very calm until someone questions the rules. NATO and the architecture of deterrence. Another pillar of European peace has a simpler name: NATO. The alliance is often described as defensive, a shield. And yet, NATO's existence rests on a single promise. If you attack one of us, we will all respond with overwhelming force. This is not pacifism. This is deterrence. Peace maintained by the certainty of destruction. For decades, Europe outsourced its security to this logic: American bases, nuclear umbrellas, military guarantees. Europe was peaceful because someone else stood ready to fight. When peace depends on someone else's power, this dependency created a paradox. Europe became a global voice for diplomacy and restraint, while relying on military force it did not fully control. When wars happened elsewhere, Europe condemned them. When weapons were sold, Europe profited.
When consequences arrived, Europe negotiated. Peace remained intact at home, but the system was fragile. Because peace that depends on external power is only as strong as that power's priorities. The refugee question, when war comes knocking.
Eventually, the consequences returned. Refugees from Syria, Afghanistan, Libya, and Iraq arrived at Europe's borders, not as invaders, but as survivors of wars Europe had influenced, directly or indirectly.
The response revealed cracks beneath the calm. Some nations opened doors, others built fences. Politics shifted, fear returned. Peace was tested not by bombs, but by people. And suddenly, Europeans asked a new question. How peaceful are we when the suffering reaches us? Trust, skepticism, and the European divide. This is where opinions split. Some look at Europe and see genuine progress.
Former enemies cooperating, democratic institutions holding, high standards of living, decades without continent-wide war.
They believe Europe earned its peace. Others look deeper and see something else.
Economic dominance disguised as unity, military power hidden behind alliances, moral language masking selective action. They don't deny the calm, they question the cause. Both views exist for a reason, because Europe is not a lie, but it is not the whole truth either.
The dangerous comfort of belief. The most dangerous thing about peace is believing it is permanent. Europe believed that in 1913. It believed that in the late 1930s. It believed that again after the Cold War.
Each time, history corrected the assumption. Peace is not a destination, it is a condition, temporary, fragile, and reversible. And the moment a society stops questioning it, it begins to lose it.
So, is Europe the most peaceful continent?
The honest answer is not yes or no. It is when, where, and for whom.
Europe is peaceful internally for now. It is stable compared to many regions at this moment. It has learned to prevent certain kinds of war, not all conflict. Peace exists, but it is layered, conditional, and protected by systems that are rarely discussed openly. The truth sits uncomfortably between belief and doubt, and perhaps that is where real understanding begins.
Final question. If peace requires power, and power always creates inequality, can peace ever be truly innocent? Or is it simply the calm surface of forces we choose not to see?
This was not a verdict. It was an invitation to think deeper than slogans, rankings, and headlines.
Because history doesn't reward certainty, it rewards awareness.
This story was brought to you by MindBurst Universe, where ideas are questioned, truth is layered, and nothing is taken at face value.